Before we start this awesome episode, we got to give a shout out to our friends and sponsors at Pet Greens.
Yes, this is like our cat's 5-star salad bar.
Right. They nibble on their organic cat grass like it's fancy hors d'oeuvres before every meal.
Yeah, and honestly, it's really an important part of their routine as well. It helps with their digestion, and it even helps with those hair balls.
Yeah, it does. And it's totally organic. No pesticides, herbicides, or any of that junk.
Nope, just super healthy greens that bring the outside in and help our indoor cats thrive inside.
You can find Pet Greens on Amazon, Chewy, Petco, PetSmart, PSP, and for our Canadian listeners at Pet Value too.
Okay, so now let's get to the podcast.
With wine. Always with wine. I'm Jay.
I'm Adrian.
And together we are the
Two
Crazy Cat Ladies. I'm going to cut you.
I think I just peed.
Buckle up.
We're back in the closet.
Welcome to another episode of Back in the Closet with the Two Crazy Cat Ladies. Guys, we are I know we always say the words excited so much. We're like super excited. I know we say that a lot, but for real, many of you guys who like follow us and you've been, this week and last week on our lives, we have been talking about this man that is with us right now, Dr. Randy, the pet vet that we got to meet last month in Seattle for the first time. And we literally stayed up until midnight drinking wine and talking about health.
Enamored.
It was so much fun. We were like, okay, this is our new favorite vet. We cannot wait to introduce you to our audience and get to talk to you more. So Dr. Randy is or at the event, CMEA. I was like, what event was it? At the CMEA, at the CMEA event, he gave a presentation called C.A.T.S, C.A.T.S, and believe it or not. It was absolutely informative and riveting. We were like so excited. So we asked Dr. Randy to come back on this podcast and we'll do a 4-part series of the C.A.T.S with you guys. So you guys can also get the amazing information that Dr. Randy has to offer because he has a special place in his heart for cats. So Dr. Randy, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to see you, and it's great to be in the closet.
Oh, we love having you here. So before we get started, before we jump into all this amazing information that we have, for everyone that is, I know we've got a few here. Aaron is here. Laura Lee is here. They got to meet you in Seattle as well. They're very happy to see you again, as are we. For everyone else that may not know who you are, what you do, how you got to be so intelligent about our feline friends, can you share a little intro of your own, please?
Thanks. Well, I tell people that I got so intelligent because I made every mistake in the book over the 43 years of being an integrative veterinarian. So it's really exciting to be able to share this with your audience because they're so right in my wheelhouse. My goal has been through Dr. Randy Pet Vet that I educate cat owners with every piece of knowledge that I have. But what I will tell people is I've been practicing for 43 years. It came to me in the first few years of practice that I was, as a Western veterinarian, very well trained, putting out fires, but I was never getting to wellness and health span. And I'm not talking about longevity, just longevity, because if they're not healthy during that time, so that's why I call it health span. So I started that pathway so many years ago, got certified in Chinese medicine, acupuncture. Then I got certified in rehabilitation medicine. Then have been working with nutritionalists, supplement people, had a couple supplement lines of my own over the years. But it came to me that I had a national radio show for 10 years and it was so exciting, but the radio station really lost its touch and they didn't have the technical people. So people said, well, you got to start doing podcasts and speaking, and that's how we met. So I go out there when I can and try to spread the word. And I'm so thankful for you two guys because it really makes it, it gives me a great place to have an audience to share this information.
And we are all so hungry for it. It is, your presentation in Seattle was we just kept looking at each other. And Laura Lee and Aaron were there. And we were like,
we were like standing shoulder
guy?
To shoulder. And it was like the only presentation that we were like, we can't leave. We have to watch this whole thing. It was absolutely amazing. So thank you for bringing this. So as I said, it's going to be a 4-part series, C.A.T.S. And C is today, and we're going to be talking about complete nutrition and microbiome, which I know you just, when we sat down and had that wine and talked, I know that you just have so much knowledge to offer the audience. So take it away. Yeah,
like, where do you start with that when you think?
Yeah, so let's get into it. So the thing I want the audience to understand is when you hear, oh, there's nothing else we can do, don't believe it. There are so many options out there, and that's what us talking will really bring to our people, our cat parents, our pet cat guardians. So I do this mnemonic C.A.T.S, C-A-T-S. C stands for complete nutrition and microbiome. A stands for activity. T stands for teeth. S stands for stress reduction. We're going to break every one of those down, but let's talk about complete nutrition and microbiome. So what we find is that so many of our cats suffer from inflammation. Okay, inflammation is the key word for all of us. So many diseases, even Alzheimer's now is breaking down into an inflammatory disease, not just the plaques that we develop. So when we look at inflammation in a cat's body, where does this come from? Because people say, well, my cat's not, I don't know what could be causing inflammation. Well, the first number one piece is their food. So I talk about get them off kibble. Please get them off kibble. Kibble is a doubly processed product. It's heated at very high levels, causing something called advanced glycolation end products, or AGEs, Maillard reaction, and then it's extruded in another processing. So I use a little slide in my talk that we eat about 59% of our diet is processed. Our cats are at 84%.
Yeah.
And the reason is just that kibble is so processed that they're like eating a McDonald's hamburger every day. We all know where that could get us. So I ask my cat owners immediately, get them off the kibble. Okay. Also avoid the inflammatory things that I dictate, which are rice, white potato, soy, corn, or wheat. We really want to watch those things in their diet. Okay.
Right.
So when people say, well, if I get them off the kibble, what do I do? Well, the food hierarchy, and we've talked about this, Karen Becker's book is wonderful for this. Even though it's written for dogs, it's very applicable in the fact that fresh whole food is number one. The problem with fresh whole food for our cat people is, as a veterinarian of 43 years, I would have a very hard time balancing my cat's diet because every day you pick a different protein. There's different amounts of calcium. There's different amounts of vitamin D. It's just not feasible to do that really very well, quite honestly. Then down from that are lightly cooked foods. There really aren't a lot of lightly cooked foods for cats. I mean, they're coming, but it's also very expensive. So for people that have multiple cats like you and me, it can get really pricey. So my next step down is whole raw food. Okay. Now in Tucson and in Vegas, we have a problem because, it gets to 105 here. So you send me a frozen product, it ain't going to be frozen. I don't care how many ice packs you use. By the time I get to it, it's going to be mush. Okay. And this is a problem because it breaks down. We worry about things like salmonella and that in raw food. I'm a huge fan of freeze-dried products. I love freeze-dried products because for our cats, it's protein and veggies. It's none of the simple carbs that we talked about. They get their carbs from the veggies, and you add copious amounts of warm water to hydrate it. Well, that's so great for our cats because you all know, as I do, the more we can get our cats drinking, the better off we are. And here's a place where we can add tons of water. My cats love their food. I put a thin liner of freeze-dried on the bottom. I add twice the amount of hot water or warm water to it. I let it sit for a while. They go nuts. So my cats, Batman and Flash, are both Devon Rexes. And Batman is showing his age a little bit. He's got a little punch, but he's doing great. But that freeze-dried product is a great way to go. There are also now air-dried products that are coming that look impressive. We just have to be careful. And I tell people, the most important thing is be a label reader. Look at the label on the back. because so many of our cat people come to me and they go, and I've had, these are all professionals, and some of them were with Dr. Weil here at the Integrative Medical Center. And, they're looking at their food every day on themselves, and they're not looking at their cat's food. And that's an easy fix. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Cool. Yeah. So, the freeze-dried product's great. The air-dried products are great. Obviously, I am really big on supplements. You guys are great on supplements. I love my cats to take some omega-3 every day. I try to avoid pure fish oil because fish oil is 3, 6, and 9 omegas, and 9s can be inflammatory for our cats. So we've got to be careful with that.
Yeah, the ratio of when it comes to omega-3s is very important. But also when it comes to fish oil, what we find is that, the majority of the fish oils are hopefully in, a glass container, because you want it to be in a glass container. But the exposure to oxygen, as soon as it's exposed to oxygen, it just starts to break down, degrade, right? Even go rancid and over time. And so you really have to keep it in the fridge, and you have to use it within a 30-day period in order to get the full value of what you're trying to give your cat. So that can often be hard, especially if you only have one cat and people are selling it, selling the fish oils in large containers. We made that mistake, actually. That's how
we've all done that. And sometimes I even try to point people to caplets, because they're individual packets of fish oil. Anytime you open the bottle, just like you said, every time you open the bottle or you pump it, you suck oxygen. And even though it doesn't go rancid to you and I, the body recognizes that, and it has to form what's called free radicals to scavenger that oil. We don't want our cats to work any harder than they need to. We want them to get the product. So it's a great point. Great point.
Yeah. Krill oil is one of our favorites. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. Oh my gosh, we could go on forever. Okay, so I just want to say, going back to your freeze dried, I think that is that's awesome, because especially for cat parents, I know it can be kind of expensive to get freeze dried, but as far as convenience and quality, we're really hitting the mark there. And I think that's a great place. We try to lead a lot of cat parents to freeze dried when they're not ready to go raw. They're not ready to go, fresh, or they're having trouble getting their cats to eat any other type of food, right? Freeze dried is a great alternative.
I love that you started with the inordinate amount of options that we now have for our cats, the different types of food, right? And I think that we can all kind of evaluate which one will work best for our particular situation and budget, all of that. Can you speak a little bit to just why this is so important specifically for cats? And also, we talk about being label readers. I'm doing a shotgun question here. Should never do two.
Yeah, no problem. You're good.
Can you talk a little bit too
He's not
about
drinking wine like we are.
I'm still on coffee, even though it's 6 o'clock, 6:30 here. So
wow.
Oh, I would not be sleeping tonight if I was still on coffee. But
I haven't even left work yet, guys. I'm still in my work outfit here. So
wow, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, this is such a joy. Honestly, I love doing this. So yeah. So I didn't understand. So tell me what you want me to speak to, because I didn't quite.
I never quite got the question out.
That's right.
I'm just rambling. So the different types of food that are available, but why is that so specifically important for our cats? Even like differences between for the differences between a cat's diet, even between like dogs and humans. Yeah. Why it's so important, and talking about being a label reader, understanding the difference between meeting AAFCO standards versus what is actually bioavailable for our cats.
Yes.
Oh God, that's a great question.
Finally got it.
It is really important because cats are obligate carnivores. They need protein, and we know in a lot of diseases, especially as we start seeing our cats and dogs age, they're not getting enough protein. They're just not. And also it becomes harder to absorb that protein. So many times in my older cats, I'll use a little bit of Prozyme, a digestive enzyme, to help break that down prior to them eating their main meal. But the freeze dry, just as we mentioned, is so convenient. And you're traveling, you got your cats with you, you got freeze dried in a bag, you just add hot water. And I find that if you slowly add it to their kibble, you can easily transition them over. And you want to do that slowly, honestly, because we don't want to give our cat system upset. One of the things we're going to talk about next is microbiome, and many of our animals are not balanced. And so you start in people say, oh, I tried a different food with my cat and immediately she got sick. Well, the reason is it's really not the food. It's really the cat's body and how it's able to process that food. This is critically important for all of our cat parents to understand.
Yep.
And then when you mention AAFCO standards, they are so minimal. If you went by AAFCO standards, you're just never getting enough. That's all there is to it. We know we can do so much better with that. And then I think I mentioned that it's balanced. One of the things that I see when I do a lot of cat allergy testing I use a company called VDI Labs, which is really cool because they do an IgE, both environmental and food allergy. I find that, and they do vitamin D levels. Many of our cats are low vitamin D. And it's a very simple supplement to add back. I use RX vitamins, they're D3. There's also D3 product. I don't know if you guys have a D product, but it's an easy add back. But we got to know, and that test shows it. So for all those reasons, I don't even go by AAFCO anymore because that's just worthless, But I do look at what the cat is doing. My big thing is, where's their weight going? How are they performing, in their mobility? What are we seeing with all this? And obviously that speaks, a fortune about, how they're doing on their food, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's too, from a veterinarian's perspective, like I weigh our cats every month just to keep an eye on their weight, mainly because I don't want them getting too chunky. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But for people that are noticing weight loss, I mean, just speak to the importance of, when a cat starts losing weight, what do you see as the main reasons for that? And what do you consider, I often feel that if people say, well, my cat's losing a lot of weight, then it's more than just a few ounces.
Yeah.
What are some of the main causes of that, and how can, good food help that kind of situation?
But again, another great question. I'm going to keep on saying that because I know that that's what's going to be from you guys. But, weight loss in cats is very subtle. We talk about how even in osteoarthritis in cats, 60% of our cats could have osteoarthritis by the time they're 6, and we may not even know it. It's subtle. They're not jumping quite as high. They're not getting up on the bed like they used to. They're not whatever. But the weight loss thing can be very subtle. And there are three major, there are a number of major reasons, but the three big ones that I see in my practice is hyperthyroidism. So the thyroid gland has a functional tumor in it. It's producing too much thyroid for our cats, and it'll cause their metabolism to be really souped up, and everything they eat, they burn up. So they're eating tons of food, but they're still losing weight. Okay. So we test for that. That's a simple test. The second is kidney disease. Chronic kidney disease comes on slowly. And I love the fact that we now have what's called SDMA, which is an early enzyme to tell us about this weight loss, So it is something that we can start to diagnose early, and I've got fixes for that, it's not medicine, and then the third really big cause that I'm seeing is small bowel lymphoma. This is the most disconcerting disease for me because we never used to see this. And now all of a sudden we're seeing tons of cats with it. What small bowel lymphoma is they get the cells that are lining the small intestine become cancerous. They get swollen. They don't absorb their food normally. So a cat could still be eating a lot, and sometimes they don't with this, but they're losing weight. Also, you could easily see vomiting. You could easily see diarrhea that's persistent. And, people try things like metronidazole, which is a word I never mention on my shows because I hate that drug. But, these are things that we see, but those are the three biggies. Obviously we see heart disease, we see dental disease. There are other things that can cause some of that, but the big three were those three, actually.
Let me ask you this real quick about small bowel lymphoma, because we're seeing more and more of this lately too. And it always seems to be hand in hand with IBD or IBS. They come to us and they say, my cat has IBD and the small bowel lymphoma, SBL. What what tests are there tests that you run to confirm that diagnosis? Because we also see a lot of, we've unfortunately, we get a lot of people that come to us, after they're just discouraged by their veterinarians, and they tell us that, well, they didn't run any tests. They just said my cat has cancer, right? Like, and we get all the time in different ways. And so they're, so
what can we ask for more definitive?
As cat parents, what can we ask for if that isn't, if they're just suggesting that it's small bowel lymphoma and not actually testing for it?
So there's definitely a continuum with this disease in cats. You mentioned small IBD or IBS. When they have inflammatory bowel disease, that's obviously a tremendous amount of inflammation in the bowel. I do my best to find out where that's coming from. Often I talked about that VDI allergy test that I'll do. Sometimes if people can't afford it, I'll do Gene Dodds's NutriScan test, which is a food sensitivity test. Now that doesn't give me the environmental allergens and it doesn't give me all the foods, but it's a help. Okay. The other piece with that is animal biome, which we're going to talk about by checking the biome, the good and bad bacteria. So those are things, but it's interesting what happened with this. So you constantly have inflammation. Well, at some point, the body is going to say, okay, I've had it. And now we get this cancer forming, and that's what ends up happening. Your question about testing is really important because I was trained to do endoscopy. So endoscopy is using a fiber optic tool, going down a sedated cat's throat into their bowel, getting some pieces, and you can diagnose IBS, IBD, or small bowel lymphoma with that. Also, sometimes you can do x-rays or radiographs and see the bowel swollen, but things have really gone further than that now. We have ultrasound, which many, many times can also indicate that the bowel wall thickness is too thick. It's not a diagnostic, but even better, and I can't tell you, I haven't done an endoscopy or an x-ray on a cat for this in years. And why is that? Again, VDI Labs has developed a blood test for small bowel lymphoma, and it is spot on. I mean, it comes back, guys, and it tells us, okay, you have IBS, IBD, small bowel lymphoma. And it can talk about the pancreas and the role of that. Is there pancreatitis involved? Where the vitamin D levels are, like we talked about. But it is so wonderful because a little bit of blood and in basically no time, and the time it takes to get to the lab and back to me, we have a diagnosis.
Wow, and that's so non-invasive for the cat too, and probably a lot less expensive than an endoscopy for sure, right? So
is that something that you think most vets are fluent in, or is this something that a cat parent would need to ask their vet to run this test through this lab?
Yeah, I think they would have to ask, honestly.
And so because that down, VDI, write that down. If you're
it's VDILabs.com.
Oh, perfect.
And the test that they would ask for is a
specific to that
diagnosis.
Yeah, or just they would ask their vet for it.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect good question. It's called I believe it's the Advanced Cancer Diagnostic Test. Right. But it also, the nice thing is that it'll come back and say, no, you don't have small bowel lymphoma, but you have IBS and you have pancreatitis. Or no, you don't have this, you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and you have low vitamin D levels. So we really have a lot of information from that test in one blood test that is very simple to do. As you said, totally non-invasive, other than drawing a little bit of blood, and our cats do great for that.
Yeah, they do. Much better than an endoscopy.
Kind of a piggyback question on this small bowel lymphoma, because it is so, and we're talking about cat nutrition. Do you have a hypothesis on why there's such growth in this unfortunate area? And do you see
it doesn't pertain to nutrition?
Or do you think it might be, we live in a toxic world and maybe it's, things that we're bringing into our home? Do you have an idea?
Well, I do. I have a couple ideas. I try to think about what has changed in our cat world since I started. That was before the light bulb. And what where we're at now. And one of my thoughts initially was the tin cans that our cat food came in.
Yeah,
we don't know how much of that tin. I mean, obviously, it's toxic. Okay, we don't know how much of that leached into the food. Okay. So I often thought, and I've never seen this written anywhere or studied for that matter. So I don't know. I'm just telling you, I look for things that what could have changed, I also think our kibbles are huge in this, because not only did we talk about the ultra processing, but there's a huge amount of glyphosate or Roundup in our kibble. They're doing biopsies on cats in veterinary schools, looking at their livers, and just in case they're doing a biopsy. A post-mortem on a cat, just try to figure out what happened, and they're taking some of the liver and they're testing it. They're finding 30 times the amount of glyphosate or Roundup in our cats and dogs' liver. So where's that coming from? Well, in a dog, often, they go out and walk on the grass, they lick their paws. But in cats, we think it's coming from their food. These are all grain-based diets.
Right.
And guess what? We use insecticides like it's going to town anymore in the United States.
Yes. And even the grain-free diets, right? Like they're replacing it still with products that are still treated with glyphosate, like still treated
Absolutely.
with these. I truly believe, not to mention, even say it wasn't, the amount of carbohydrates that cats actually need in their diet versus how much they're getting in these kibbles. And then you think about what carbohydrate, like exactly what you said, inflammation, right? What carbohydrates do. Even our doctors will tell us that you need to cut back on your carbohydrates if we're super inflamed and, or dealing with inflammatory issues. The diet helps us, and the diet will help our cats too when it comes to that. But I do want to say this, and I'll have to find this study because I had it printed out for a while.
Sure.
But there is a study on the tin cans and
really?
The lids. It's not with inflammatory bowel or cancer or anything like that, but it is with hyperthyroidism. So I'll have to find that, because we spoke about that a few years ago. There was a study that was on the tin cans. Even if it was BPA free, they were showing the adhesive on the lid was directly related to an increase in hyperthyroidism in cats. Isn't that interesting?
Okay. Very interesting. And there's one other thing I want to mention about the theory is over vaccination. I really, really believe that, because we've been doing titers on vaccines here since they were available. We send our blood to Kansas State University. They do an amazing rabies titer. They do an amazing upper respiratory 3-way titer. And we, honest to God, I can tell you that since I've been doing that, and it's been so long that I've been doing it, that we've actually seen cats that get their first kitten shots, and at 1 year, we start doing titers. And by the time they're 16, they're still protected.
Yeah.
16. I'm not talking about 3, 4, 5 years. They're still protected. So to me, that's amazing, and if that's the case, we're putting vaccine on top of vaccine on top of vaccine. The body only has so much immune system to where it's going to overreact. And what does overreaction look like? Cancer a lot of times.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because we say that all the time. Like oftentimes one vaccine can last your cat for a lifetime, but hearing it from a veterinarian, a practicing veterinarian at that is just like, absolutely. Thank you.
And
thank
we
you
really
for
do need
saying
to
that.
make titers far more mainstream. Since we're talking about vaccines for just 1 second, and you said you see a lot of cats that will get their kitten vaccines. There was a question here, I think, from Kim that said, what vaccines do you recommend for kittens
that are indoor
only?
Yeah,
do you
that's a great question, and I struggle with this all the time. So I'm going to tell Kim that not only is it uncertain for a lot of our pet parents, it's uncertain for some of the veterinarians. So I do a couple of the upper respiratory vaccines separated, 3 weeks apart. I do recommend FELV, and the reason why I recommend FELV is because we have so many, our cats can't go outside in Tucson because there are so many predators, they're going to get eaten no matter what. I mean, we have hawks, eagles, coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions, dogs, so it's just not safe. But people keep their windows open. And, if you have an outdoor cat that's basically feral, that cat could be an FELV positive cat very easily. If it sneezes or, kind of spreads saliva through that screen, which is not very it's pretty porous, your cat's going to be exposed. So I do early FELV vaccines. But in Arizona, we also have a big problem with rabies. So, I do usually one rabies shot when they're really young. It's got to be after 16 weeks. And then they titer out from there just fine. Now, people can argue with that. I mean, there's a lot of people who would say that's overkill or that's too much. I don't think so, honestly. I think it's enough to get them protection, but not too much to cause them huge problems. And I separate them out. I never, ever give a upper respiratory vaccine and rabies at the same time, ever, because that is really asking for problems.
Yeah.
I love that you said that, because just spreading them out, it's just such advice, and it's something that we can just.
And I would encourage, for us as humans too, I would encourage that, like if you're going to get your, we don't get any vaccines, but if you're somebody that likes to get their yearly flu vaccine and their yearly COVID vaccine or whatever that is, maybe spread that out. I know that many are saying, give it all to you at once. And I'm like, no, why would you do that? But especially for our cats that are this small, right? Like they're tiny little beings, and their bodies can't handle it even as much as we can as humans. I have one more question before we move on to the next, and I think I have a segue into that. Just because we have a comment here that is asking about kidney disease. That
was going to be my question.
Yeah. So
Diane
has a cat that was just diagnosed with stage 2 kidney disease. And so since we're talking about nutrition, she's asking about the prescription food, which she says she doesn't want to give. Could you speak to the prescription diets for many of these? There's like a prescription diet for almost everything these days with our cats.
And she's also giving IV fluids under the skin every 3 days as well. So
sub-Q fluids. Yeah. So that's a great question. Tell her that that's a great question. So, the thing is that I don't use any of those prescription diets. The reason why I don't use the prescription diets is read the label. The first ingredient on most of them is corn. Okay. There isn't a cat that's going to go out into a cornfield and eat corn. Okay. It's inflammatory. Some of them are wheat-based. Some, so I don't use them because I find that they're very inflammatory. And I think kidney disease has tremendous amounts to do with inflammation in their body. Okay. So what I do is quite the opposite. I actually feed them the same thing we're talking about, these high protein diets, which everybody says, oh, you can't use protein in a chronic renal failure cat. Well, towards the end stages, maybe not. But I use a product called Porous 1 or Azadil, which is a probiotic that binds nitrogen. So creatinine, BUN, SDMA are all nitrogen breakdown products. So you can give them protein, but bind the nitrogen and safely use a higher protein diet, because it's not going to affect them if they weren't getting Azadil or Porous 1. Porous 1 is really easy. Open a little packet and put it in there. Azadil is a capsule. You have to put it in there too. I also use a product called Aminovast. And Aminovast is a natural product that actually increases blood flow to the kidney. It's called GFR. Glomerular filtration rate. And it does it naturally. So I open the capsule, put that in. And then the third thing I do is because those diets you're talking about are really low in phosphorus, because phosphorus is a real problem as the disease gets going. Phosphorus causes the stomach to have hyperacidity, for them not to eat, for a lot of different problems with hyperphosphatemia. I use a product called Naraquin, which binds the phosphorus naturally. So I know it sounds like a lot, but my kidney cats do great. I just did this talk for 1,000 Japanese veterinarians on this very topic. And, they were kind of blown away because, honestly, we're taught, you use the prescription diets. That's the way you go. And then eventually you're going to need to do, enalapril, a medicine, an ACE inhibitor, or whatever. So I've had tremendous success doing that program. And my cats have done extremely well. Now, I will tell you that I monitor them every 6 months. I will do lab work, and that includes a urinalysis. I see so many profiles I'm getting from other veterinarians. They never got any urine from the cat. And, you got to look at the urine, because the urine shows how much protein they're exuding and where their specific gravity or their concentration is. And some of these cats, obviously get urinary tract infections and stuff like that, which can really hurt their kidney. So every 6 months, I'll do that senior profile, it's called, which really looks at these things, and we monitor them, because what we're looking for is not so much just the increase, but the trend.
Yeah.
People don't understand this about lab work in cats. Your cat can come to me, and every year I do lab work, which I really like to do, because I really check. I also check a heart enzyme called proBNP, which is really the beginning diagnosis of cardiomyopathy or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in our cats. And if let's say your kidney numbers are, like, your creatinine's 1 and 1, and then the next year it's 1.5, and then the next year it's 1.8, I'm going to start to worry about that, because it's creeping up. It's not what they have been normally. Why is that happening? And I look for a reason, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. We recently had Dr. Katie Kangas on the podcast, and talking about kidney disease. And she was telling us about a more recent study that was out talking about reducing the protein in our, first of all, there's senior cat diets now that you can just get on the shelf. You don't have to get from your veterinarian, that are already reducing the protein, and they're being recommended at 7 years of age. And that just, that just makes me want to, it blows my mind. But
mine.
Right. But she was saying that this specific study showed that stage 1 and stage 2 does not need reduced protein. That even stage 3, the only reason that they would in stage 3 kidney disease reduce the protein is so that the cat will enjoy the food a little bit better as they're progressing to stage 4, where we do want to reduce the protein. So I'll have to find that study too. I think she sent it to me right afterwards. So I'll have to find that study. We can geek out about that stuff. But let's also talk about, so we were talking about the amount of different types of food that that now is available to cats. And so many of them, are good food for our cats.
Yes.
What do you think about diversifying diet? How important do you think that the diversification of diet is for our cats, which will probably lead us into microbiome?
And what does that diversification look like to you?
Yeah.
Well, I think most people like to think about rotating the protein that they're feeding their cats. That's often where they go. The biggest thing about cats that have kidney disease, especially, or some of these other things, is I find that they like something for 2 or 3 days and then they don't like it at all. And this is something I hear from my cat parents all the time. So I do tell them, if they're eating rabbit, which is a cooling meat, go to turkey or go to beef. I kind of rule out that they don't have any sensitivity or allergy to it, by doing the other things we talked about. But I think it's a really important thing. I think rotating that, they get tired. If you ate the same thing every single night, you probably get tired too. Now, some cats are great that way, but I do find that once they start getting sick, they definitely are picky about stuff. So they'll like something for 2 or 3 days and then they won't like it. It can drive cat parents nuts. It drives veterinarians nuts, because then they ask, like, well, what do I do? And I go, well, try a different protein. But I mentioned cooling, rabbit. So one of the principles I also want to teach our people is that in Chinese medicine, there are 3 meats that I avoid in cats early on in these diseases, especially in allergy, GI disease, kidney disease, is they have indicated, the Chinese have looked at food and us for thousands of years. They really didn't look at cats, obviously. But we've extrapolated this over, and the 3 meats I stay away from, if they have any inflammatory type disease, is lamb, venison, and chicken. And chicken's a big one, because a lot of cats love chicken. So I tell them to use turkey, and they like it just as well, and it's just as cheap. But stay away from those meats in that situation with the inflammatory disease, because they're called hot meats. So they create heat in their body.
Oh, wow. What about fish?
Fish is great. Fish is great. I mean, people worry about, I had a lady that, obviously we never want to do just tuna because tuna doesn't have enough taurine in it and can give our cats eye disease, ocular disease. They can get really bad retinal degeneration and whatnot. So you got to be careful. But I had a lady that was intermittently, I love this, the cat tail on your face, buddy. I had a lady that was feeding a lot of tuna, not all the time, but definitely her cat loved it. And she was so worried about mercury. So we actually did a VDI mercury test on that cat, not even a trace. So I was so thrilled. That was one of the first ones I had done. And with all of this tuna that she was feeding, and now don't get me wrong, she's looking for ethically sourced tuna, basically the best she can get, but it still has mercury in it. Nothing. So I was thrilled with that, quite honestly.
Wow.
That is the first time I've heard. And I do thank you for mentioning the sourcing of it, because they have found in different fish just incredible differences in how tuna is sourced. But that is,
yeah, because we're always like, well, tuna, we always say use tuna as like a high value treat, right? Like the tuna water to get your cat to eat a new food or take a supplement or something like that, a little bit, like we always say, use sardines. Smaller fish are better because the smaller fish are going to have less heavy metals in them than the larger fish. Same with salmon, right? We say, just in moderation, whatever we're feeding in moderation. So that's very interesting to learn, to know. Awesome. Okay. So going back to diversification of diet. So we saw, I'm sure it was a study, because I think it was Rodney that we learned this from a few years back, but they were talking about diversifying diets in all pets. But not just like diversifying proteins, but also diversifying brands, like feeding different types and different, so it's not all being sourced from the same place. And it was a study, and how the study, I think it was an animal biome study, actually. I think it was an animal biome study that was showing that the microbiome of dogs and cats that are eating a more diverse diet was much stronger. Could you explain a little bit about, like, for the 101er here that doesn't even know what microbiome is, because many of us don't, and it's kind of a new word in the general population.
Connect the dots between nutrition and microbiome too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, part of that C is microbiome, and the reason why I make it part of the complete nutrition is that I've learned, and we've learned, that those of us that have been working with Animal Biome, the company that I really love, looking at cat poop, that it can be so messed up. It can be so out of whack. And so, guys, microbiome is all of the good and bad bacteria and yeast that are in your body that create all kinds of issues. I tell people that years ago, there may have been like 100 papers a year written in the human literature on microbiome. Last year, there were 70,000 papers written. I even saw a commercial the other day on TV that was talking about a vitamin that helped your microbiome, which is BS, by the way. But, I've looked at this for a long time, because if we want to balance our cat's body, that is so important. And getting a little poop and sending it to Animal Biome, and they do a DNA test on the whole thing, and they tell us what's in there, what's out of whack. I have, for a great example, I had a cat with chronic skin disease. No one could figure it out. We did the VDI test. We found out what it was sensitive to, what it was allergic to. They even had mold in their house. And the reason I knew that was the test came back sensitive to mold, and I said, get somebody out and look at your house, because there's mold there. You got to find it, and we're talking about Tucson, it's like Vegas. It's the driest place in the world, but by doing that microbiome test, basically after we do the sensitivity test, I find out what's going on. That cat had huge amount of streptococcus in its stool. Streptococcus causes tremendous amount of hot spots, lick sores, allergy, skin allergies, and whatnot. And how we balance that is just give them good poop. It's called fecal microbiome transfer. And that solves the problem of what's called dysbiosis or leaky gut syndrome by balancing that cat's body. Now, the Animal Biome has capsules, which not always the easiest to do in a cat, because you're not going to be able to open them up and give them to the cat. So we do direct FMT transfer. We actually use a freeze-dried product to give it to them through a red rubber catheter as an enema. They don't even get sedate. I don't have to sedate them to do this. It's really it's just not a problem. People I don't want my cat to have that. It's actually really simple, but we then repeat the biome in 3 months to see what we've done, maybe adding their S. boulardii, which is their beneficial yeast, or the digestive enzymes we talked about. Or a lot of times that test will come back and says, your cat needs more protein, or your cat needs more fiber. And we do those things, balance the vitamin D level, and boom, all of a sudden we get wellness. I mean, these cats are so much better because now we've balanced their body. They're not absorbing all this stuff into their system they shouldn't get. And it works beautifully. So I'm a huge proponent of microbiome. I wish my goal before I retire, which I hope is not too soon because I'm ready. I've been going hard here at 71. I'm ready. I want to keep on going, But my goal is someday that biome test becomes part of a wellness panel for all of our cats.
Yes.
So, honestly, it is one of the easiest. I know it can be a little bit costly, but the amount of disease and money it will save you in the long run, oh my God. I mean, I couldn't even tell you, and if we could find that out early on, we won't get a lot of these other problems down the road.
Yes. Oh, preach. I love that. Yeah. Do you do ozone therapy as well?
I do. So on those microbiome cats that we get that are in dysbiosis or out of whack, we basically do 2 ozone saline enemas an hour apart. And then because that eliminates the biofilm, which is what's blocking a lot of this stuff being taken up in the bowel. It eliminates the biofilm and allows the FMT product to work so much better. So yes, absolutely. I use ozone all the time, and people freak out. You mentioned ozone. Have you ever talked about ozone on the show before?
Yeah, we've had Dr. Margot Roman on before, and she was the first one to introduce us to ozone therapy.
But if you want to give a little nutshell for anyone who's never heard of ozone.
Sure. So ozone is O3, oxygen is O2. So what we're doing is we're providing a super oxygenated product to our cats that basically does a lot of different things. I mean, ozone in general, the scary thing is if you look on the internet and you put in ozone, FDA warning will come right up and say, this is a toxic gas. Well, it's only toxic if we breathe it, okay? And it can be bubbled in olive oil or glycerin, and we can give it to our cats, and it's not going to be toxic. But we use it either as a saline enema or even just ozone enema gas-wise. We use it under the skin. We use it under tumors because cancer hates oxygen. And the reason why cancers keep on getting bigger and bigger is they wall off the ability for oxygen to get in there. It's their self-defense mechanism to stop. They want to continue growing, obviously. But ozone being O3 is wonderful. I compare it to a lot of times in people, they'll use what's called hyperbaric oxygen chambers to treat a lot of diseases. Well, that's just super oxygen. We can give ozone that way. And right in your backyard is the father, Dr. Frank Schallenberger is in Las Vegas. And he is the father of ozone therapy in MDs. An amazing man.
I didn't know that.
Many of the MDs that use ozone have learned from him.
Wow. That's awesome.
Such an awesome addition.
Yeah.
So getting back to the FMTs, because I remember the first time that I heard about FMTs, I was like, you're kidding me, right?
Right.
Kidding me. But there is so much written now, research.
Yeah, because you're taking, when you say you basically give the cat poop, right? That's just kind of like a blanket way of saying that. But the FMTs are taken, it is the donors, basically the poop is coming from other cats that are super healthy, not over vaccinated, not over medicated, they have no problem. And obviously they're pooping well. They have a healthy poop. And so taking that poop and you're putting it into a cat that's not healthy. And we've interviewed a few people about this, but Dr. Margot Roman said that it's especially doing it the way that you do it versus the pills. It's like a 1 in and she has seen like the reversal, like the like IBD be reversed completely. And she's also seen so many cats that have their behavioral issues that are also because of that gut brain access, right? Like she's seen like cats that they could barely touch, that were basically feral, that, you know, you couldn't pet, become these like lap cats that are super sweet. And after they, you know, after they went through an FMT procedure.
And shout out to Margot, because really she's I don't know if she wants me to call her the grandmother, but she is the godmother of all of this for us in veterinary medicine. You know, she raises her own animals that are, like you said, vaccination free, been fed raw diets. I mean, these are really healthy animals, and all of the companies test their FMT products to make sure they have in there what they get. You know, people say, well, how do I know it's what it is? Well, we know because these companies are really, really strongly, they're ethical, and they're really wanting to give, you know, if we're going to do this, and we're going to count on this really reversing the situation, which, like you said, it's amazing. But, you know, like you said, the gut-brain connection is amazing. Here at the University of Arizona, they're doing a study in humans, and I'll just give you one little piece of that. A little girl came in who was 5 years old, who was seizuring every single day on 4 medicines. 5 years old, 4 medicines, seizuring every day. They did her a microbiome. They did 2 or 3 FMTs, and some animals take more than one, but they did 2 or 3 FMTs for her. She's seizuring once a month, and the medicines are all being reduced. So that just shows you, you know, the vagus nerve comes from our bowel, it goes to our brain, and that's where that behavioral thing, just like you mentioned, it's so glad you brought that up, because it's really huge.
Yeah. Wow. Man, you were absolutely amazing. And we could seriously talk for forever. I know we're like already like getting past time. So is there anything else that you would like to add in that we have missed, or that you want to like leave with this podcast, that, you know, leave cat parents thinking?
Question?
Oh wait, she has one more question.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure. Yeah.
And then you can do some final thoughts.
No, go ahead.
Being that the microbiome is so important in so many ways, right? And that nutrition certainly can impact it. Do you have like for those of us that may feel that, you know, FMTs are out of our budget or not an option in our area, and certainly can't do the capsules because those are huge, and they have to be capsules that your cat swallows, that it actually gets down into so you can't just sprinkle poop on their food. Do you have 1 or 2 tips for those of us that really want to help improve the microbiome, and we're trying to feed good foods? Are there any other things other than, you know, like FMT, just good principles nutrition for the microbiome to live by?
Well, one of my favorite little tricks is using goat kefir. People know about kefir, and, you know, they know about cow kefir. Cow milk is very high in lactose. Our cats don't need that, you know, but goat milk is not. And goat kefir, if it's a good product, and it's hard to find sometimes that they're not really highly processed, they'll give them a lot of probiotics, and cats love the way that tastes. And the other thing that really works well is fermented food. I even have cats that'll eat sauerkraut, you know, or kimchi, you know, as long as it's not real spicy. Yeah, I know. So, I mean, and that will give them a lot of probiotics. So that's one thing. Second thing, please avoid antibiotics unless they're absolutely necessary. Because every time you do an antibiotic, remember, it's killing the bad bacteria in the area that you want it to work, but it's also killing a lot of the good bacteria in the cat's bowel. And I mentioned metronidazole. I shudder. My hair turns gray thinking about metronidazole, because every cat that gets inflammatory bowel disease, the first thing that they do is get put on metronidazole. Metronidazole was created by bowel surgeons in human medicine so that if they got into your bowel and they leaked, you wouldn't get a sepsis or infection in your abdomen, because it kills all the bacteria. There's some really good papers that have come out recently really warning veterinarians against the use of this product. Sometimes you do have to do it, but I avoid it like the plague. So that's another tip for our clients. Try to avoid antibiotics when necessary. Yeah, and I think the other things we talked about, you know, the good food and all that, I mean, obviously it all goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I'll give it a tip, a shout out to a company that makes a product called Diagel, Diagel, and it's called like One and Done, and it's a good alternative to metronidazole as far as, because the reason they're giving is to stop that diarrhea, so we don't want to like dehydrate the cat too much, right? So we give them metronidazole, and it does that, but like you said, it does so much more damage. And some of the stuff you're showing that like it's irreversible damage after one round of metronidazole. It could be irreversible damage that they can no longer, they'll no longer possess the bacteria to process certain things. Yes. So even certain proteins. So Diagel is another tip that I think is actually available on Amazon. We tell a lot of people about.
Yes, Erin was given some recommendations, and yes, those are some really good brands that she was recommending for foods. Also, she said, I'm sending this link, the link to this episode to all my local vets.
Yes.
I am so excited. And
you're going to get me in trouble.
No, this is so informative. It's so empowering too. I think there's something certainly about your experience, and obviously you just being able to articulate it in such a way that really helps us better digest it. Right?
Yes.
Like,
no pun intended.
No pun intended. Any closing thoughts on the nutrition and the microbiome, and then can you give us a little bit of a teaser on the next
month?
Yeah, so I think I'm so glad that the questions you asked and the questions that came from your listeners were so helpful in directing us on this conversation about complete nutrition. And obviously, fresh whole food is really a great way to go. Feeding real food is really important. I had them on my podcast once, and I love the things that are being looked at. It's so nice to see in the pet world that the fastest growing nutritional area is all of what we're talking about. These freeze-dried products, these fresh whole foods, these air-dried products that we now know are so much less toxic for our cats. And then, like I said, if you have any question at all, get your vet to do an animal biome test. If your vet won't do it, you can get online and buy it yourself and send in the poop. It's just helpful to have somebody directing you, because I go over those tests with my clients. We talk about all the little things that we can do, whether it's FMT or something else. So I just really encourage our people to do that kind of stuff. And the teaser for the next one, which when are we doing the next one, by the way?
In January.
Next month.
So the next one is going to be A for activity. And people don't understand how important this is in our cats. They're happy to come home and be with their cats and sitting on the sofa and petting them. But, things like getting them to move with a laser pointer, mind-challenging games, these are so important for our animals. They get bored. Your cats get bored. And we don't want that to happen. We want them to be moving. We want them to get, I love to encourage fresh air and sunshine. So I encourage my cat people, get a harness and slowly acclimate them to, pulling a little ribbon behind it and then put a leash on it and no tug, just let them, get them used to it so you can take them for a walk, because they love it. We can't, like I said, we can't put our cats outside here because they're gone. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I love that you're starting the series with diet and exercise, because it really is like two, in my opinion, most important aspects of overall health span for our cats, right? So thank you so much, Dr. Randy. Thank you so much for coming on and being a part of this, and agreeing to this whole series, even though you're like still in the office, not even
7 p.m.
You're working late and doing your thing.
Your passion is really just
mind-blowing.
So empowering for all of us. Thank you.
Well, and I thank you, because you guys have reach, and the more we can get this out there, the better we are. And, people can get more information at Dr. Randy Pet Vet on internet, YouTube, my podcasts. Subscribe, follow me. It helps me get get involved and get some of your pet parents to come. But, thank you for doing what you guys do, because, without this stuff, a lot of our people don't get this information. They just don't. And, I laugh because there's a survey done that 90% of cat owners want to talk about diet, And 5% of the time does that happen in the veterinary office. And often it's directed at one of these prescription diets.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, it's true.
And I really
It's
want to
true.
move that needle. And
Yeah,
this is,
that's our whole goal. You know, the Susan Thixton just released a recent study that was over the past year. And just as you said, you know, the fresh food market is the fastest growing market in the pet food industry. But what is that? When you looked at it, it was amazing because the kibble world and dog food, or the kibble dry food for dogs has gone down, and it is going down as far as sales is concerned. And the refrigerated foods have gone up by like 18% over the past year. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. However, when it comes to cats, the kibble went up by 3%. We're selling more. So there is so much room in this space, in the cat world specifically. We need more voices. We need more people out here telling the new, especially people like you, you know, people like veterinarians like you, saying to the world, to the cat world specifically, like, we've got to do better by our cats so that they're not ending, you know, in the,
and not just the why,
that
it's important, also the why it's important as well. And we're just so grateful for your brain, for your passion, and for your willingness to, you know, stay up late nights while you're still at the clinic.
I love talking to you guys. You know, I'm sorry it can't be later and we can't be together doing this, but we'll see each other again, of course. Thank you for what you do, and I'm happy to continue the conversation. And next time we'll talk about activity and all importance of that, and really expand on that whole area, which, you know, is so important for our cat people.
Thank you, Dr. Randy. Thank you for everyone who showed up here live. And we will see you back next month with Dr. Randy again.
Thank you, sir.
See you guys soon.
Thank you.